Wyoming Territory, 1885. The gather camp sat in a shallow fold of grass north of the Sweetwater, close enough to the river that a man could hear it at night if the wind lay down. Wade Ferrow had been the wagon boss there for 6 seasons, which meant he owned 2 horses, a bedroll, a coffee mill, and nothing else in the world that a wind could not carry off. He was 39 years old. He had worked other men's cattle since he was old enough to hold a rope, and in all that time, he had never once put his name on a piece of paper that mattered. That was the part he thought about some nights when the fire went low and the crew slept and the river kept talking. Other men his age had a fence line. They had a door that belonged to them and a place where the sound of their own boots meant something. Wade had a payroll book with his name written in another man's handwriting. He was pouring the last of the evening coffee when the horse came in. It came at a walk, out of the blue, dark, past the picket line, and it came wrong. A horse with a rider sitting up straight has one sound. This one had another. The animal was lathered along the neck and blowing, and the woman on its back was leaning so far over the saddle horn that the crew stood up all at once without anybody saying a word. "Ma'am," Wade said. She lifted her head. Black hair, heavy and straight, had come down out of its pins on one side. Her complexion was olive and darkened by weather. Her eyes were a deep brown that took the firelight badly, and she was small through the shoulders in a way that made what she had just done seem less possible, not more. She wore a man's canvas coat over a dark plum calico skirt, and the left shoulder of that coat was black and wet in the firelight. "Is this the Ferrow camp?" she said. It did not come out as a question. It came out as something she had been repeating to herself for a long ride. "It's the Barcross Gather. I'm Ferrow." She got one hand inside her coat, and the effort of it turned her face white around the mouth. She brought out a folded paper, creased soft the way paper goes when it has been carried against a body, and she held it out toward him. "Then, this belongs to you," she said, "and I would like to know why." She was out of the saddle before he reached her, and not in a way she chose. Wade caught her under the arms and eased her down into the grass, and the paper fell between them, and the crew came running with a lantern. She had been shot through the meat of the left shoulder. The bullet had gone in and gone out, which was the only piece of luck in the whole business, and she had ridden something close to 19 miles with it. Wade had seen men come off the range in worse shape, and he had seen men come off in better shape and not last the night. He did what the country taught you to do. He cut the coat away at the seam, and he cleaned the wound with water boiled hot and a shirt washed twice, and he packed it, and he bound it, and he sent his fastest rider for the doctor at Lander with instructions not to spare the horse. Then he sat down by the fire with the folded paper, and he opened it, and he read his own name. It was a land office receipt. A desert land entry, 640 acres along a creek he knew, filed the previous spring in the office at Cheyenne. The claimant of record was Wade Ferrow of Fremont County, Wyoming Territory. The signature at the bottom was a good signature. It was a confident, educated hand. It was not his, because Wade Ferrow could write his name and read a brand book, and that was the honest end of his schooling, and no letter he had ever made in his life leaned that way. He had never filed a claim. He had never been to the land office in Cheyenne. He had never in 39 years owned a single acre of the country he had spent his whole life crossing. I want to stop here for just a moment, because I think some of you already know what that paper meant before he did. This story has found listeners in Brazil, in the Philippines, in Nigeria, in India, in Mexico, in South Africa, in kitchens and truck cabs and quiet houses I will never see. If you are one of them sitting with me tonight, this channel is still young and we are only getting started. If this story has found a place in your heart, press subscribe before you go anywhere. It helps more than you know, and it means we get to keep having nights like this one. Now let us get back, because the woman by that fire was not finished, and what she had to say when she woke up was worse than the wound. Her name was Corinne Bell. She told him that much at noon the next day, sitting propped against a saddle with her arms strapped across her body and a cup of broth going cold in her good hand, because she would not touch it until she had said her piece. Her father had proved up a homestead on Cottonwood Creek in 1878 and had died on it in 1883. she had stayed. She ran 40 head in a hay meadow, and she had done it alone for 2 years, which in that country was a thing people talked about at the store in a certain tone. In March, she said, a man named Alton Creel came to my gate with a surveyor and a folder. He is the land agent for the Cheyenne and Powder River Cattle Company. He told me the creek above my place had been claimed under the Desert Land Act, all the way down to my north fence, and that the new owner intended to build a head gate and take the water for irrigation, which is his lawful right under the entry. He said the new owner was a cattleman named Ferrow. Wade said nothing. I asked to see the papers. He would not show me. So in April, I drove to Lander and paid a clerk $2 to copy the receipt out of the record, and that is the copy in your hand. She looked at him steadily and did not blink. Mr. Ferrow, if you take that water, I am finished by August. There is no second creek, so I came to ask you to your face what kind of man you are. And the shoulder, Wade said. 2 days ago, somebody put a headgate frame in the creek above my north fence while I was cutting hay. I rode up to look at it. A man was sitting on a horse in the willows, and he told me to go home. She stopped. Her jaw worked. I did not go home. He shot at the ground to move me, and the ground is rock up there. I do not believe he meant to hit me. I believe he meant to make me small, and the country did the rest. Wade turned the paper over in his hands, once, and set it on his knee. Miss Bell, he said, I have never seen this document before last night. I have never filed on land in my life. That signature is not mine, and I would like you to understand that I am not telling you this to save my skin, because in about 1 minute, you are going to work out what it means, and it is a good deal uglier than a man being greedy about water. She worked it out in less than a minute. He watched her do it. They used your name, she said. They used my name. Here is the part of this story that is not invented, and I want to say it plainly, because people hear a tale like this one and assume the wickedness in it came out of a writer's head. The Desert Land Act of 1877 let a person file on 640 acres of dry country for 25 cents an acre down, on a promise to irrigate it within 3 years. It was written for settlers. It was used almost immediately and on an enormous scale by cattle companies who wanted the water and not the land, because whoever holds the creek holds every acre it touches. And the way they did it was to file entries in the names of other people. Cowhands, cooks, drifters, men who signed nothing and knew nothing, whose names were copied off a payroll book by a clerk with a good hand, and who would never once ride to Cheyenne to look at a record. The land office had a term for those men. It called them dummy entrymen. Whole valleys in Wyoming changed hands that way, and the men whose names were on the papers went on sleeping under wagons for $30 a month. Wade Ferrow was a dummy entryman. He just had not known it until a bleeding woman rode 19 miles to tell him. I want to pause the story here for a moment, because this next stretch is a hard one, and I would rather walk into it with company. Something happened to me the first time I understood that a person's name could be taken and used and worn like a coat by somebody else, and that a person could be robbed in an office, quietly, in daylight, by a man who never raised his voice. If you have ever been in a room where a decision about your life was made without you, and you only found out afterward, you already know exactly how Wade Ferrow felt with that paper on his knee. Tell me where you are listening from tonight, and what you are doing while you listen. I like knowing these stories travel to every corner of the world, and I have found that when one of you writes something down in the comments, somebody else reads it at 2 a.m. and feels less alone for it. Now let us get back, because Corinne Bell had a doctor coming and a hay crop dying, and Wade had a decision to make about a name he had never thought was worth anything. The doctor came at dusk and said what Wade already believed. Clean wound, no bone touched, a great deal of blood lost, and a woman too stubborn to know it. 6 weeks. No riding, no lifting, no pitchfork. I have hay down, Corinne said. Then you have hay down, the doctor said, and packed his bag. She lay under the wagon that night and did not sleep, and Wade knew she did not sleep because he did not either. In the morning, he told the crew to finish the gather without him, and he told his second man to draw his wages if it came to that, and he saddled the good horse. "Where are you going?" Corinne said. "Cheyenne." "That is 300 miles. It is where the record is." She struggled up on her good elbow. "Mr. Ferrow, you do not owe me anything. You did not do this." He stood there with the reins in his hand and thought about how to say it. He was not a talker, and what he wanted to say had been sitting in him unspoken since the night before. "Miss Bell, I have crossed this territory since I was 14, and I have never had one thing in it with my name on it. Now I do. It is 640 acres I never asked for, bought with money I never saw, so a company can take the water off a woman who earned hers." He got on the horse. "That is the only piece of property I have ever held, and I am going to go get rid of it." She did not tell him to hurry. She told him something else, and she said it quietly, and he carried it 300 miles. "They will say you are lying to save yourself. Men like Creel always have the better paper." "Then I will need better paper," Wade said. Cheyenne in July was dust and brick, and a land office with a floor worn pale down the middle. Wade Ferrow stood at that counter for 4 days. The first clerk told him a filing could not be challenged by the claimant, since the claimant was the one who benefited. The second clerk told him to hire a lawyer, and the lawyer wanted $40, which was more than Wade had. On the third day, an old man sweeping the back room told him the only thing anybody in that building had said that was worth hearing. "Son, the government does not care that a man was robbed. The government cares that it was defrauded. You quit telling them what was done to you and start telling them what was done to the United States." So on the fourth day, Wade Ferrow did not ask anybody for justice. He signed an affidavit stating that the entry standing in his name was made without his knowledge, that he had never paid the fee, never seen the land, never intended to irrigate it, and that the signature on the receipt was not his hand. He asked the register to compare that signature to his own mark, made there at the counter, before 2 witnesses. And then he named under oath the man who had come to a woman's gate with a surveyor and a folder, and had said the owner was a cattleman named Ferrow. A false entry is not a quarrel between 2 ranchers. It is fraud upon the public domain, and there was a special agent of the General Land Office in Cheyenne that summer whose entire job was the Wyoming water entries, because Washington already suspected exactly what was happening and could never get one single man to swear to it. For the same reason, nobody ever swears to anything. The men whose names were used all worked for the companies that used them. Wade Ferrow signed, and by signing put himself out of a job in every outfit between the Platte and the Bighorn. He was gone 5 weeks. Corinne Bell was not idle for 1 hour of them, arms strapped to her body or not. And this is the part where I tell you that she did not sit at a window waiting for a man to come back and save her ranch. She went home. She hired 2 of Wade's crew with her own money, $40 she'd been saving toward a mower, and she put the hay up left-handed and badly, and it was in the stack. She wrote to the land office herself and got no answer. She wrote to the newspaper at Lander and got a paragraph. And when Alton Creel rode down to her gate in August to tell her, in the pleasant voice such men use, that the head gate would go in on the 1st of September, and that she would be wise to sell out to the company at a fair price, while a fair price was on the table, Corinne Bell stood at her own fence with her arm in a sling and told him she would see him in the fall. "You are alone out here, Miss Bell," Creel said. It was not a threat. That was the worst of it. It was an observation, offered kindly, by a man who had made a career out of arithmetic. "I have been alone out here for 2 years, she said, and the creek is still running past my house." He came back in September, and he was not alone, and neither was she. The special agent of the General Land Office arrived at Cottonwood Creek on the 9th day of September with a clerk, a deputy marshal, and Wade Ferrow, who had ridden 300 miles twice in one summer and looked it. They did not come to fight. They came to measure the headgate, photograph it, take depositions, and read aloud in the presence of witnesses the affidavit of the entryman of record. Alton Creel listened to the whole of it standing beside his horse with his hat in his hand, and he did not once raise his voice, And Corinne would say later that watching a man like that go quiet was worse than watching one shout. The entry was canceled that winter. 2 others in the same district went with it, because once one dummy entryman swore to it, the agent knew what to look for in the handwriting, and 3 of the receipts had been signed by the same confident, educated hand. Creel was dismissed by the company, indicted, and eventually fined, and he moved to Denver and sold insurance. If that feels small to you, it felt small to them too. The creek was the thing. The creek kept running past her house. Wade Ferrow could not get hired in Fremont County after that. He knew he would not. He had known it standing at the counter in Cheyenne with the pen in his hand, and he had signed anyway. He came down to Cottonwood Creek in October to tell Corinne the entry had been canceled, and to say goodbye because he had a line on winter work in Montana and no reason to stay. She was at the woodpile, splitting with her left arm still weak and her right doing double duty. And she stopped and set the axe down and listened to him say all of it. Then she asked him one question. "When you rode to Cheyenne," she said, "did you know it would cost you the work?" "Yes." "And you went?" "It was my name," Wade said. "It was the only thing of mine anybody had ever wanted, and they wanted it for that." Corinne Bell looked at the stack of hay she had put up badly, and the meadow, and the creek, and the fence her father had strung in 1878, and the man standing in the yard with a bedroll behind his saddle at the start of a Wyoming winter. "I have 400 acres of grass and no help," she said, "and I am not offering you charity because I do not have any. I am offering you the north half, in writing, filed properly at Lander, with your name on it in your own hand. You will earn every foot of it, and I will work you into the ground." He was quiet a long moment. "Miss Bell," he said, "I do not know how to answer that without saying something I have not got the right to say yet." "Then say the part you have got the right to say." "I will take the north half," Wade said, "and I would like to stay to supper." She said that would be all right. He filed in his own hand at the Lander office in November of 1885 and paid the fee out of 6 seasons of saved wages. And the clerk who took it made him write the name 3 times because the first 2 came out shaky. It was the first document Wade Ferrow ever signed that was true. That winter was the big die-up, the one they still write about, when the snow came in November and did not leave, and the cattle drifted into the fences and died there in windrows from Montana to the Platte. The great companies broke that year. The Cheyenne and Powder River Cattle Company broke with them, and the men who had built their holdings out of other men's names lost them to weather that could not be filed on, bribed, or surveyed. Corinne Bell and Wade Ferrow lost 22 head out of 40, which was a slaughter, and was also, that year, close to a miracle. They lost so few because they had hay. They had hay because a woman with one working arm had put it up in August rather than wait, and because a man had come back in the fall instead of going to Montana, and because between the 2 of them, they had fed out of the stack all winter, while better outfits watched their herds walk into the drifts. They were married in the spring of 1886 at the house by a judge from Lander, with the 2 hired hands as witnesses, and no flowers because nothing was up yet. 4 years later, there was a headgate on Cottonwood Creek after all. They built it themselves in the summer of 1889. Out of squared timber and iron, they hauled from the railhead, and it watered 80 acres of alfalfa. And it was set at a height they agreed on, together over 3 evenings of arguing at the kitchen table. It took the water and let the water go, both, which is the whole difference and always was. On the evening they finished it, Corinne came down to look at the thing with the low sun behind her, and her hair coming loose the way it always did by that hour. And she stood beside her husband and read the 2 names cut into the top timber where the water would never reach. "You cut mine deeper," she said. "Yours was here first." She put her hand flat on the wood, and she did not say anything for a while. And then she said the thing she had been carrying since the night she came off a horse into the grass at the Bar Cross Gather. "I rode 19 miles to ask what kind of man you were." "You did." "I got an answer I have never had cause to doubt since. There is a lie that country tells about itself, and it is that a person is measured out there by what he can hold, by acres, by head of cattle, by the length of his fence. I have come to think it is the opposite. Wade Ferrow was worth nothing at all by that arithmetic on the night his name came back to him on a stolen piece of paper. He had one asset in the world, and it was the fact that he had never let it be used. And the moment he found out it had been used without him, he spent everything he had to take it back. That is not a small thing. Most of what gets stolen from ordinary people is not stolen with a gun. It is stolen with a pen in an office by somebody polite. And it works because we have been taught that our name on its own is not worth the ride to go and check. Go and check. Ride the 19 miles. And if somebody comes into your camp bleeding to ask you to your face what kind of man or woman you are, remember that the question is a gift, because most people never get asked it out loud. And Wade Ferrow spent the rest of his life glad that he had an answer. Sleep well tonight. Wherever you are listening from, the creek is still running past the house.